surprise in Winston Cup. Richard Petty testing. No surprise in Indy cars. Rick Mears dominates Phoenix. And a last-minute report on the jump of Robbie Knievel. This and more next on Speedweek.
Speedweek is brought to you by Dodge Cars and Trucks. On the street or off the road, it's the new spirit of Dodge.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Jenkins, and welcome to the April 13th edition of Speedweek, kicking off our second week of Thursday Night Thunder. And tonight, you'll be treated to three very different types of competition. Right after our show at 8 o'clock Eastern, we'll have the NHRA Skater Nationals from Gainesville, Florida. At 9 o'clock, you'll see the American Racing Series from Phoenix. And then at 10 o'clock Eastern, live USAC Midgets again from Ascot Park in Gardena, California. Our top story tonight on Speedweek, the continuing saga of NASCAR legend Richard Petty. For the second time in 3 races, King Richard didn't make the NASCAR Winston Cup field last Sunday at Bristol. When he missed the show at Richmond a few weeks back, Petty ended an 18-year, 513-race streak of consecutive starts. Now, true, there were unusual circumstances in missing those races, but the bottom line was he wasn't fast enough. Many thought that heads would roll at Petty Enterprises this week. That hasn't happened. Instead, Dale Inman and crew are working hard to make sure that King Richard doesn't miss any more races. Well, John Kernan is standing by with the details. John?
Well, Bob, the King's crown has been tarnished the past 3 races, missing 2 of those, and that has sent the Petty crew back to the track, scrambling for a little bit of extra speed.
The way the track is very rough right, Sean. Every time we ever come, we do a lot of work getting the car in the corner just with the shocks, okay?
We never was really that much concerned about speed as we was getting the car dialed in for the race, and then we'd take care of it from there. But right now, the problem's getting in the race.
Petty Enterprises pulled up stakes in level cross and moved to Martinsville for the day, with Richard bringing a veritable army of crewmen to help him sort things out.
We probably won't run in real fast laps, but what we're going to do is do a lot of changing and find out if we're going in the right direction or the wrong direction. Really do a test situation and hope that we learn enough from it that when we do come back, we'll be able to do something with it.
Petty says they've fallen behind because they just don't have enough time to get the car sorted out on qualifying day. So they've decided to step up their testing effort. Running an endless number of laps on an empty track might sound like a grind, but it gives Richard the chance to do more of what he likes to do the most. Drive a race car.
It makes it more enjoyable. It makes it a lot easier for us to do the work in the sense that when we come and there's not but 2 or 3 cars there, we don't have to worry about doing all these cotton-picking interviews and all that stuff, and you can go ahead and do the job that you come to do.
Petty's name has been synonymous with NASCAR since the beginning, and that's the subject of this week's Dick Wallen Racing Classics.
Well, John, this has been a familiar sight for the past 32 years. Richard Petty with helmet on, ready to race. Father Lee actually started the Petty dynasty, but it is Richard's success that's caused the name to be synonymous with stock car racing. Richard's career dates back to when NASCAR also meant dirt racing. It was tough to negotiate those corners, but his first win was on the dirt in 1960. He's won on virtually every type of racetrack, 5 times on the road course at Riverside, 7 times at the Daytona 500. That's nearly twice as many as any other driver. His best season was in 1967 when he won 27 out of 48 races and 1 of 7 Winston Cup titles. It's been nearly 5 years, though, since Richard won his last race, which came on the 4th of July at Daytona. That 200th win is reflective in the many trophies and plaques that fill the Richard Petty Museum in Level Cross, North Carolina, in what used to be the garage that housed early cars. Many are hoping Petty's decision to do some testing represents a new determination that will result in better days ahead for the King and even that elusive win number 201. Well, Richard has had a great career, but our question we would like you to respond to: should Richard Petty consider retirement? To vote yes, dial 1-900-720-6061. To vote no, dial 1-900-720-6062. There is a 50-cent charge for each call. Lines will remain open throughout the weekend. NASCAR's Winston Cup division tried the radial tires at Daytona in February, but they were withdrawn following tire-related accidents by Dale Earnhardt and Bill Elliott. Well, the radials will be tried again this weekend at North Wilkesboro, that despite a recent testing crash by Ken Schrader at that 5/8-mile facility. Will the teams like the radials, or will they go with the Hoosier bias plies? Well, join us Sunday at 1 o'clock for the answer. Now, while the Winston Cup teams will be trying those new radials this weekend, Chevrolet is preparing a brand new race car come Talladega time in less than a month. The much talked about Chevy Lumina will be succeeding the very successful Monte Carlo, which has won over half the races it's competed in since 1983. It won its 6th straight Winston Cup manufacturer's title last year, but Chevy has stopped making the Monte Carlo, and Winston Cup rules say a car must be in current production in order to race. The Red Bow Tie Brigade now think they've come up with a better idea.
This car is probably more developed as a race car than any car we've ever had. The Monte Carlo was a passenger car converted to a race car. This car had racing in mind when it was built, so it's the first thing that Chevrolet's had in a long time that really was made for racing.
The Lumina, it is hoped, will be more competitive with the Fords and other GM products, which have won 9 out of the last 11 Winston Cup events.
Speedweek is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oil. The big Q stands for quality, always has, always will. And by Dodge Cars and Trucks. On the street or off the road, it's the new spirit of Dodge.
Coming up, that noise in Thunder Valley Sunday crashes on Bristol's half mile. And ARS drivers have trouble on the lightning-fast Phoenix Oval. Now for details on that race that Richard missed at Bristol. For most of Friday and all of Saturday, rain fell at the NASCAR fastest half mile, but on Sunday, records fell in the Valleydale 500 Winston Cup race. The first to go was the one-lap qualifying record. Mark Martin shattered it by nearly 3 miles an hour on brand-new pavement. That, plus tires and the notorious 36-degree banking, caused a record number of cautions. This incident involved Larry Pearson, Eddie Birchwell, Butch Miller, and Brett Bodine. And this is how it looked from Brett's vantage point. Ernie Irvan found the right combination in D.K. Ulrich's Pontiac for a while, leading nearly the first third of the event. Then he crashed. A cut tire sends him hard into the fourth turn wall. Hut Strickland is involved. Rusty barely escapes, and Brett is a victim again. In all, there were 20 caution periods, a Winston Cup record. Morgan Shepherd had a similar crash to Irvin's, and he collected Terry Labonte, whose struggle with Junior's Ford continues. Bobby Hillen Jr. not only hit the wall, but then had a fire break out under the car. He escaped injury. There were also 34 lead changes, a record for Bristol, and several led for the first time this year, including Neil Bonnet and Bill Elliott. Craig Sachs led the most. Another first-time leader this year, Sterling Marlin, had things go wrong in the pits. Left side tires were loosened, but not tightened. Needless to say, they didn't stay on very long when he reached the banks. And how about the previous week's winner at Darlington, Harry Gant? You know, with Petty not in the field, he was the oldest at 49. Well, he spun a couple of times, but drove to a 10th place finish. And the points leader going in, Alan Kowicki, finished 20th after breaking a water pump and spending a long time in the pits to cool down the Xerox Ford. Rusty Wallace, who had an inner ear infection on Saturday, thought he might need relief, but I guess when things are working right, your body can overcome that type of thing. The series mileage and lap leader now has the most victories for 89 at 3. He beat Darrell Waltrip by a quarter of a second. The real battle at the end was for 3rd and 4th. Jeff Bodine edged Davey Allison and Dick Trickle. Those two crossed the line in a near dead heat. Jeff's 3rd place finish puts him on top of Winston Cup points. Rusty moves all the way up to 2nd. Allen slips to 3rd. Then Earnhardt, and 5th is Sterling Marlin. That rain that I mentioned on Saturday washed out the Busch Grand National race, so it was run Monday afternoon. Rick Wilson, who started from the pole, sure wishes it would have been held on Saturday in front of a bigger crowd and our ESPN cameras. Rick will lead all but 38 laps. Harry Gant didn't last long. That's he against the inside wall after a tangle with Bill Gratton and Phil Parsons. Harry was first out of the race. Phil went on to finish 12th. And how about Dale Earnhardt? He spins here with Jimmy Spencer and then is bumped by Tom Peck. The official cause of his departure was listed as steering problems. Okay. The final pass for the lead was when Wilson got by Rick Mast in number 22 and Mark Martin came along. That's the way the top 3 would finish. It was Rick's first ever Grand National victory, and he's the 6th winner in as many Grand National races this year. Now, last year, the Busch Grand National Division ran 13 races before they had a repeat winner. The youngest competitor in the series, 20-year-old Rob Moroso, is one of those who has won already this year. He also leads the points. Now, while the NASCAR season is well underway, the kart Indy cars held their first race this past weekend at Phoenix. And the Penske cars picked up where they left off from a dominant '88 season when they won the last 7 pole positions in a row. We get that story from Rick DeBrule.
There were no surprises in the front row at the IndyCar opener. Penske teammates Rick Mears and Danny Sullivan put the new PC-18s right where everybody expected them. It was row 2 that had the surprise, or maybe shock is a better word. Dominic Dobson and the new Bayside IndyCar team had qualified a year-old Lola with last year's Cosworth in the 3rd spot, ahead of 4 Chevys, 3 Judds, and a pair of factory Cosworths.
We are down some horsepower in the Chevrolets, but I think we made that up in the chassis. And if you look at this track, you're spending a lot more time going around a turn than you are in the straightaway here. So with the chassis working as well as we've had it, I think that's what gave us a little bit of an advantage in qualifying.
When the race started, Danny Sullivan jumped out to a quick lead ahead of teammate Mears. At first, he seemed to be pulling away, and then Mears started pulling him in, finally blowing by on the 27th lap. 3 laps later, Dobson's day came to an end after a back marker got in his way, but it was by no means a discouraging weekend.
You know, racing at this caliber requires the very best equipment, and I think what we've got now is much closer to that than what I've ever had to work with. So I think Long Beach will be a good event for us.
Except for a few laps, Mears led most of the early going until he killed his engine coming into the pits on lap 67. The result, a 54-second stop.
I was definitely upset and at myself. But then, with it being under a yellow, we were fortunate. We knew we wouldn't lose a lot of time right by being under the yellow. We'd just go basically to the back of the pack. We almost lost the lap to Michael anyway, but we beat him out of the pits.
Michael Andretti, in his first race as a teammate to his father on the Newman Haas team, led the next 52 laps, mainly by holding off his pit stop as long as he could. Bobby Rahal saw his first race with the Craco team come to a sudden end on lap 85 when he tangled with rookie Bernard Jourdain. Bobby used the brake in the action to introduce himself. Sullivan led for nearly 30 laps late in the race, but he finally had to pit and turn the lead back over to Rick. And he never let it go, eventually winning by more than a lap.
I've never felt a perfect race car yet since I've been in racing. And this one probably is as close to perfect as I've felt.
But it was by no means a Penske sweep. Al Unser Jr. managed to squeeze between them for second. But he said there was no way he could have caught Mears in the new PC-18.
When you're a little bit better than anybody else's and it's a mechanical advantage and you're at a short oval, it's magnified a great deal. And so that's what happened today.
So it looks like once again the winter testing rumors were painfully true. Penske is going to be awful tough to beat this year. But if Al Unser Jr. and even Dominic Dobson have anything to say about it, this year is going to be anything but dull. In Phoenix, I'm Rick DeBrule reporting for Speedweek.
This is Gary Lee. The support cut at Phoenix included the American Racing Series. Mike Groff led the 17 March Wildcats into the first turn. Over half the field was comprised of rookies who were wearing red stripes on their rear wings. And just like last year, you had that feeling there was going to be trouble. This guy is one of those rookies, Benicio Sami from Italy, who learned the hard way that desert sand can kick up quite a cloud of dust. A few laps later, the most serious accident would occur. That's Roberto Quintanilla losing it exiting turn 4. P.J. Jones hits him. Jones is nailed by Gary Rubio, and before it's all over, Dean Hall was also involved. In slow motion, you can see how those involved got knocked around, not the least of which was Jones. There were no serious injuries, although Hall obviously had some discomfort in the shoulders. Groff was challenged late by defending race champion Paul Tracy, but Tracy could never make the pass, and Groff had his 4th ARS career victory. And then there was the Super V race, where Mike's younger brother Robbie started from the pole. The race's only crash wiped out the car of Canadian Hunter Jones, the brother of kart's John Jones, but he climbed out uninjured. However, the accident scattered enough debris that the 60-lap event ended under caution, with Groff taking the checkered flag. His $10,000 purse was the largest in the series' 19-year history.
It's interesting to note the last time Rick Mears won a race at Phoenix, he went on to win the national championship. And one other item, PPG has agreed to sponsor the kart circuit for 3 more years and will contribute an additional $2 million in prize money. It seemed to members of our staff as they watched auto racing on television this past weekend that new camera technology provided more different and unique perspectives than ever before. At the Rockingham Winston Cup race earlier this year, ESPN debuted the Crew Cam to help put you, the viewer, close to the action. But we didn't stop there. On last week's Thursday Night Thunder broadcast, ESPN, for the first time ever, placed a camera on a midget, providing dramatic shots never before seen on live national television. Over the weekend, ESPN had 2 in-car cameras riding with Michael Waltrip and with Brett Bodine, who unfortunately was involved in this accident with Ernie Irvin. The IndyCar race was on Sunday, too. Not to be outdone, ABC, in addition to having cameras with Mario Andretti, Al Unser Jr., and Bobby Rahal, debuted a crew cam of its own, worn by Mears crew chief Richard Buck, and a never-before-seen face cam shot on Al Unser Jr. All of this technology has come along since 1981, when the first in-car camera was used at the Daytona 500. Now, the possibilities are endless. Just wait until our coverage of the Champion Sparkplug 400 Winston Cup race at Michigan. We'll have a camera that'll blow your doors off. Well, Michigan was the site of Richard Petty's 500th consecutive career start last year, which reminds us of our question of the week. Should Richard Petty consider retirement? If you think he should, dial 1-900-720-6061. If you think he shouldn't, dial 1-900-720-6062. Each call costs 50 cents. Lines are open throughout the weekend. As the name Richard Petty is synonymous with stock car racing, so is the name Don Garlits with drag racing. And Big Daddy has a new job. Beginning with the Southern Nationals at Atlanta on April 20th, he'll be crew chief for Shirley Muldowney. Garlits has not competed in drag racing since a crash in Spokane, Washington a couple of years ago. He's most recently been a TV color commentator for the NHRA. Shirley's still trying to get on track following an accident at San Air in 1984. Her last win was at the NHRA's Winston World Finals in 1983. Well, that organization's inaugural Winston Invitational meet was in Rockingham, North Carolina last weekend, and thousands braved uncomfortable weather to watch the action. Here's that story, plus reports on off-road and sprint cars from last weekend. Mother Nature washed out qualifying on Saturday for the special all-star event, but the competitors proved victorious over the weather on Sunday. While the spectators wished they were inside, the dragsters preferred the outside lane, that is, as all 3 main event winners used the same lane. The biggest surprise came in the pro stock competition as unheralded Larry Morgan got the jump off the line over Warren Johnson. Morgan held the momentum, edging Johnson at the finish line by just 11 one-thousandths of a second to record his first career NHRA Pro Stock victory. In the funny car class, Don the Snake Prudhomme cruised to victory over Kenny Bernstein, who broke at the line. It was also Prudhomme's first win of the season. And finally, Connie Kalita posted a 5.194 ET in gunning down Gene Snow in the top fuelers. Meanwhile, further down south, the Mickey Thompson Off-Road Grand Prix Tour visited the Louisiana Superdome in New Orleans. The dirt to be used was left outside, uncovered, and a torrential downpour left the racing service a virtual quagmire. However, officials refused to postpone the event, which marked the halfway point in the season. The 2 heat races left the packed house on its feet as Jeep teammates Walker Evans and Rob McCachran dueled to a photo finish in Heat 1. Evans was declared the winner. McCachran also saw victory snatched from his grasp in heat number 2 as Robbie Gordon nails McCachran in the final turn. Gordon, however, was not penalized for rough driving. The main event proved uneventful by comparison as Gordon grabbed his 4th straight victory in as many starts. Roger Mears, who started next to Gordon on the front row, came home second. Steve Kinzer has to be wondering if he's ever going to win in the USA Sprint Series, which he helped create. He's 0-4 this year. A 2-day program here at Manzanita in Phoenix was condensed to 1. Only 17 started the feature. 5 were USA regulars. Here's Sammy Swindell passing Mark Kinzer for the lead. Mark eventually finished 3rd. Steve was 2nd. So, Sammy, how do you assess the USA Series so far with the low car counts and less than hoped-for crowds?
It's been a little bit of a struggle, but I think, a lot of places we've run, they haven't run sprint cars, or, there's generally not a real healthy field there. So I think when we get back to the Midwest and back to where there's a lot of sprint cars and a lot of fans, we're going to be just fine.
Well, USA is headed for the Midwest right now after 2 scheduled events this weekend in Texas were canceled because, according to a USA spokesman, race fans in that area have exhausted their racing budgets for a while. Earlier this week, we saw an indication that regional sprint car organizations, such as the Ohio-based All-Star Circuit of Champions, may be hurting from the World of Outlaw USA battle over cars and drivers and thinking seriously about their future. There's certainly nothing wrong with this picture, a wing being put on a sprint car. But this may look a little weird. The car is on a paved racetrack. The All-Star Circuit of Champions thinks a pavement series for wing sprinters may have a future.
When you go to the races, you actually, you know, if you pay $15, $18, $20 like some tracks charge to see some of these big names or some of these sanctioning bodies, and you don't get to see this caliber of drivers, it really, I think, hurts in the long run. It's hurting the fans is what this whole thing is doing.
The All-Stars have scheduled the first of what may be a 4 or 5 race series here at Columbus Motor Speedway on May 19th. Now, don't bring your super modifieds or pavement-type sprinters. This will be strictly for upright cars that normally run on dirt. The All-Stars are also considering a sprint car version of the NASCAR restrictor plate that would limit the amount of air that's injected into the engine. This, Emig says, will help the under-financed racer by reducing the number of costly engine rebuilds. Coming up on the Speed Week calendar, Sunday afternoon, another live Winston Cup race, this time from North Wilkesboro, North Carolina. The First Union 400 will be on at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. Much of the vintage racing video on Speed Week is furnished to us by Dick Wallen Racing Classics. Tomorrow night at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, Robbie Knievel will attempt a jump of about 150 feet over the Palace fountains. Robbie's father, Evil, tried it back in 1967 and was in a coma for 30 days. The most recent attempt was in 1980 by Gary Wells.
90 miles an hour, he's up. 23-year-old Gary Wells, he's missed it. He's in trouble. He's in trouble. He's down. He's hurt. My God.
Now, there was a news conference in Las Vegas earlier this week, and from that came a clear indication of who is most concerned about this latest attempt.
All I can tell you is that every day this gets closer, it's a much tougher thing on me. So, we're working on this as hard as we can, and everybody's trying to do the best they can to make it a success and something we can all be proud of.
I'm not nervous one bit. I've waited for this 10 years. I'm totally committed, and I'm going to go all the way across some fountains with my hands off the handlebars and land safely on the other side and walk away.
Gary Wells, the last person to attempt the jump, is alive and well. In an unexpected development, he interrupted the press conference, saying he deserves another chance to make the jump and will attempt it just before Robbie makes his. Caesars officials say they'll place a cement barricade at the top of the ramp to prevent such a thing from happening. Robbie's attempt to jump the Caesars Palace fountains can be seen on a pay-per-view basis tomorrow, Friday night at 9 o'clock Eastern. Contact your local cable company for details. And don't forget to vote on our question, should Richard Petty consider retirement? To vote yes, dial 1-900-720-6061. To vote no, dial 1-900-720-6062. Each call costs you 50 cents, and lines will be open throughout the weekend. We'll have the results next week on Speed Week. Now, don't forget, coming up next, the NHRA Gator Nationals, followed by the ARS race from Phoenix, and then live USAC Midgets at 10 o'clock Eastern from Ascot Park. And we'll see you next Thursday night at 7:30. So long, everyone.
Speed Week has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oil. The big Q stands for quality, always has, always will. And by Budweiser. Beechwood aged for that clean, crisp taste. This Bud's for you.